Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, UAB Alumni Career Design Fellowship, How to Design a Career You Love. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Since we are virtual, please excuse any technical issues that may pop up. If you experience problems with your video or audio, click Reconnect to get back to the webinar quickly. Before we begin, I want to ask a quick question. Where are you in your career? Are you in the exploration stage and focused on networking and finding that dream job? Maybe you're in the establishment phase where you're reassessing your plan and starting to save for retirement. Perhaps you're in your mid-career and looking for a change in your career and even trying to figure out how to incorporate a work-life balance. You could also be in the late career stage where you're staying the course and thinking about leaving your legacy. Or maybe, just maybe, you're in the decline phase, which is ultimately the one that leads into retirement. I'm going to go ahead and keep that poll up just for a few moments for you to share which stage you are in. Just a heads up to today's attendees, this webinar is being recorded. We'll be uploading it onto our website by tomorrow. I hope to do it this afternoon. If you have a question for today's guest, please drop it in the chat. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. Looking at the results of the poll, 34% of our attendees right now are mid-career, 27% in late career. And there's always an opportunity for career change, as we're going to find out in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and shut down the poll. And today's webinar is part of our partnership with Mission Collaborative. We're currently enrolling alumni for this year's UAB Alumni Career Design Fellowship that'll begin April 6th. Through the fellowship, discover exciting opportunities that could be a great fit for you, learn how to leverage your skills and strengths in a new career, and get support from fellow alumni while expanding your network. Learn more at alumni.uab.edu/career fellowship. So at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Ashley Artrip. She's pinch hitting for Steph Dutch, who unfortunately lost her voice and was not able to be here, but we're so excited. Ashley is CEO of Mission Collaborative, a company she co-founded in 2019. She is also the author of the book Career Design, which guides readers through action on how to make meaningful changes in their careers. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your schedule. And we're sorry that Steph wasn't be here, but I'm excited because we've been able to catch up a little bit because it's been a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so thrilled to be here. It's so great to see you again. And I absolutely just love the partnership with UAB. We've worked together for quite some time now, and it's been such a pleasure working with you and your alumni. And also just want to say thank you so much for everyone who's tuning in on this Tuesday afternoon. I'm coming from New York, where it's very rainy and kind of cold and dreary. And so hopefully at the end of this webinar, you can kind of be re-energized and kind of juiced up around your career and kind of what perhaps comes next. And so with that, I'll go ahead and jump in. And just to kind of reiterate in terms of housekeeping, we'll take questions at the end. But if you have them as I'm kind of going through this content, please feel free to just drop them in the chat. And I'll make sure we can kind of get to those at the end. And if I don't get to your question, I'll have Greg send out my email address and you can email me directly. And I'll be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off just to save bandwidth, but I am here and we are going to go ahead and jump right in. So let's talk about why you might be here right now. At some point in time, and perhaps you're feeling this way currently, you've probably felt disengaged, checked out, or burnt out at work in some capacity, especially with the extra challenges that COVID has placed on us over the past few years and kind of the effects after COVID. It's really easy to feel overwhelmed with work and not feel particularly engaged and kind of in this space of what do I do now? And it turns out that this is a very common feeling, and it's not just specific to challenges the coronavirus has posed on our work life or kind of the past couple of years as we've kind of, have started a different relationship with our careers. This has been happening for quite some time. So each year, Gallup, the polling organization, does a poll called the State of the American Workforce, where they get a sense of how folks feel about their work and how engaged they are. And the results are typically pretty stunning. So on average, around 2/3 of Americans feel disengaged year after year. I actually had the privilege of working at Gallup and being kind of on the inside of all of this. And it was just so interesting for me to see year over year just how much folks feel kind of disengaged with their work. So all that is to say, you're not alone. And disengagement really has effects not just on productivity and how you show up at work, but also how you show up in life too. The truth is that we spend a tremendous amount of our lives at work. And if we're doing things that don't necessarily give us the energy or bring out the best versions of ourselves, it really does, kind of have this major effect on us. And it's quite a shame. And that's really what inspired me to co-found Mission Collaborative and help people design more fulfilling careers. But making a change to your career is very hard. And that's probably why you're tuning into this webinar right now. If it were easy, most of us wouldn't feel stuck and disengaged in the majority of the time. Most of us kind of wrestle with these kind of questions here that you're seeing on the screen. So what do I even want? I know I don't want this, but I don't know where I want to go next. How do I avoid starting over? Perhaps you have a decades of experience and you maybe have an expensive credential and you're not really sure how to use that in a new path, and you don't want that to go to waste. This kind of loss aversion definitely keeps us stuck in kind of the place that we're in. Or when will I even have time to think about my career? When will I have time to change careers? Or lastly, I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't even know what to do to even scratch the surface to kind of answer this question of what I should do next. And so I want to kind of kick us off with a thought question. I want you to kind of think about this and write a few words down, or perhaps a sentence or two, about the biggest obstacle or fear that you have right now. We'll take 30 seconds, the next 30 seconds. I'd love for you to just think about this. If you want to put it in the chat and you feel compelled to share that, that would be awesome. You do not have to. But one thing I always get surprised with is that most folks feel that they're the only ones kind of feeling this fear or this limiting belief. And that's not true. Most of us are feeling a lot of the same things. And so feel free to share in the chat, or also just keep it to yourself, jot down on a piece of paper, whatever it may be, whatever you have in front of you. We'll give you a couple more seconds here. And once we wrap that up, we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about kind of what are the things and the fears that hold us back. So when we're kind of thinking about this kind of stage of what I like to call analysis paralysis, it's one of those stages where we kind of do very common things. So our first reaction is we kind of get backed into this corner and we kind of just start applying to jobs online. Right? I have definitely done this. I have been feeling stuck in my career and I'm just like, I don't even know what I want. And I'm going to go see what's out there on Indeed or on LinkedIn. We just kind of start finding jobs online that sound relatively interesting, or we send our resume out into the void. And we kind of treat it like it's this numbers game where you might set a weekly goal of applying to a set number of jobs each week. And then you kind of just wait for at least one of those organizations to get back to you. And that's a very exhausting strategy. I've been there and I've seen a lot of people do this with very little success. And sometimes even the worst case scenario will happen where you actually get a job offer and that you applied to, and you realized, hey, this is actually not a good fit once you're settled into that new job because you didn't really know what you were looking for in the first place. And so kind of thinking about what's been holding you back, what are your big fears? All of those things really inform our decision making. And so the second thing that some of us might do is work with a career coach. It's pretty unfortunate, but usually more often than not, career coaches are pretty expensive. They're inaccessible to most people. And so we kind of just sit with this fear, sit with this limiting belief that I'm not really sure what to do next. I'm just going to start playing the numbers game. And then it's kind of gets to the point where it gets exhausting. And then the most common thing that happens, and maybe you're there right now, is we do nothing. We kind of just continue churning wherever we're at, hoping that someday it gets better, not feeling fully engaged. And we think to ourselves, man, there's just something that has to be out there that's better for me, but I'm not really sure what to do differently. And then one day you may wake up and realize that enough is enough and it's time to do something. So that's what we're kind of going to talk about today. Talk about kind of that psychological journey that you experience, and hopefully give you some tactical steps to kind of work through and get unstuck with kind of this position that you're in. So obviously, as Greg said, I am stepping in for Steph. So this is somewhat of a misleading slide here. I'll actually jump to the next one and just share very quickly a little bit about myself and more importantly, a little bit about Mission Collaborative. So my name is Ashley Artrip. I am the CEO and co-founder of an organization called Mission Collaborative. We started back in 2017 with in-person workshops. It was kind of more of a side gig at that point. And then we got really serious and we kind of became a real business back in 2019. And since then, we have served over 20,000 career changers at various stages in their career. More often than not, they fall into that mid and late career stage, average age being around 40 to 45. Folks who are kind of looking for that next step in their career path. And that's typically who we work with, but that is not as, that's not limiting to folks who are early on in their career looking to be intentional about how to design their careers. My background is in career coaching. I'm a certified career coach. I'm also a certified StrengthsFinder coach. If you've ever taken the Gallup StrengthsFinder assessment, I love it. I think it's a great way to view the talents and skills that you have and how to kind of unlock a different level of productivity and kind of flow and engagement in your work. And like I said, I also worked at the Gallup organization before co-founding Mission Collaborative, spending a lot of time doing research on what makes people fulfilled in their work. I have been very, very interested in that question my entire career. And that's really kind of what led me down this path to co-founding Mission Collaborative. So now we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty here. So now that you know a little bit about me, you know a little bit about Mission Collaborative, let's get into this kind of career design process here. So what is this? So this is kind of our bread and butter when it comes to the work that we do, the fellowship that we offer. Again, that UAB is running here in the next month. Let's start kind of with this high level overview. Regardless of where you are in your career, this process can work for you because it uses the same fundamental approach no matter where you're at. So this process was inspired by the principles of design thinking. So if you're familiar with design thinking or if you're interested in checking it out, I highly recommend reading the book called Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett, who's out of the Stanford Design School. Also, you can just Google, what is design thinking, and you can learn a little bit more about the framework itself. But this framework, coupled with kind of best practices in career coaching, serves as sort of the pillars of our program. And on top of that, we're constantly iterating the curriculum based on the feedback that we receive from our participants so we can make it better and better. And like I said, we've worked now with over 20,000 different career changers, and we are now on version 11 of our curriculum, which is really amazing to kind of see how it's evolved and changed over time, and also how it constantly updates because there are just so many new things coming out and different tools that can help you in your career design journey, which makes me really, really excited. But back to the career design process here. So there are 4 distinct steps: reflection, definition, testing, and launch. And I'll walk you through each of those here in this webinar. So the first stage is reflection. So this is the kind of kicking off this process. It's all about answering the questions: who am I? What do I care about? What am I good at? What do I really want to create in the world? It kind of amazes me the number of people who kind of have gone through life kind of accepting that things are kind of just the way that they are, and I'm kind of using someone else's definition of success to kind of guide my thinking in my career. And it's very easy to do this. We're not often taught how to change our careers. We're not often taught how to intentionally design a career that aligns to what you're naturally good at, what you want to create in the world. And oftentimes you kind of have to learn by doing. And so that's what makes career design very complicated, is that you actually need a ton of data points. But also with that, you need to do a lot of reflection. And so reflection is all about understanding what makes you the unique person that you are. And it's the reason it's so critically important to start with deep self-reflection, because it's going to remind you of really what actually matters to you. Oftentimes I see, like I said, people kind of just dart from one career to the next, not really finding that longer term satisfaction, because they oftentimes haven't taken the time to really take a step back, identify what it is that's really going to bring them fulfillment, whether their career is a means to an end or it is the means and they're deeply excited about it and they want to, really invest in this career because that's kind of where they are in their life, but it's okay to kind of have that change over time. And the second reason why we start with reflection is that we want to reduce the risk of making a misstep and jumping into a new career path that's not actually a better fit. And so the only way that we can avoid taking that misstep is by having a much clearer sense of what we're doing in the first place. And so again, it kind of reinforces this need to know of who am I, what do I care about, and what do I really, really want. And the third reason we start with reflection is because by having a clearer idea of who you are and what you're looking for, it acts as sort of a compass for you. And I always like to use this analogy of Google Maps. It would be phenomenal if you could just type in the destination for your career, and then you have the exact kind of steps laid out in front of you and how to get there. That obviously does not exist. And in fact, it really wouldn't make sense for it to exist. And I wouldn't want for it, for it to exist, because that doesn't give us the space to have kind of our destination change and modify over time as we learn more things about ourselves, and the things in our life change over time as well. So rather than thinking about career navigation as kind of just making this steady progress towards a singular goal, we like to think of it as having a compass that helps you navigate in this right direction. And so the better you understand yourself, your motivations, your interests, your values, and your strengths, like I was mentioning, the easier it is for you to navigate in that right direction. And so there are 4 key areas of the reflection phase. So let's talk about some of the specifics here. The first is core values. So all of us have core values that serve as these guiding principles that help us make difficult decisions and navigate who we want to be in the world. They're really, really important when you think about your career, because if you find yourself in an organization or an industry that actually conflicts with one of your core values, it is so deeply difficult to find engagement, and it's hard to find that fulfillment because it is fundamentally misaligned with kind of what you stand for and what you care about. And so as a simple example, I have worked with several folks who work in lucrative industries who oftentimes feel really, really unfulfilled because they don't actually believe in the work that they're doing. And they feel like, yes, they're making this great paycheck, but at the same time, it's coming at the cost of their core values. And so really the thing that's going on there, the conflict, is that there's a misalignment. And with that misalignment, it's going to be very, very difficult for that person to find fulfillment and engagement in that role, because again, fundamentally, what you think, feel, and believe are at odds with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. The second area of reflection is your strengths. So all of us have strengths. These are sort of our natural tendencies and how we show up in the world by default. In other words, they're sort of how we're naturally wired to think, feel, and behave. So these are the things that you're kind of naturally, inherently born with, and you perfect over time. This could be, relationship building skills. It could be strategic thinking skills. These are kind of like the larger buckets. I highly encourage folks to take the StrengthsFinder assessment. If you haven't already, it is so insightful to kind of giving you some kind of clear sense of kind of what you think, feel, and behave kind of on a day-to-day basis. There's a lot of positive psychology research that suggests that when we do our best work and when we do work that utilizes our strengths, we are so much more effective and motivated than when we do work that just avoids our weaknesses. And so understanding what your strengths are and being able to name them and really own them is really helpful as you think about the different career moves that you could make to better leverage those strengths so you'll have more energy and more effectiveness in your work. And if you stop to think about it, why wouldn't you want to do work that is good, that you're good at and that comes to you easily? The third area of reflection is skills. So specifically transferable skills. These are unlike strengths because these are the things that you're not necessarily hardwired to do naturally, but these are the things that you cultivate through rigor, through practice, through intention. These are something that you might get a certificate for, something you might study in school. And more often than not, they're probably something that you'll learn on the job over time. All of us have skills. Many, if not most, of those skills that you do have are transferable to a lot of careers. One of the things that hurts me the most when I'm working with career changers is that they assume that their skills are too niche and they're too specific. And it kills me inside because I kind of see their skills and I'm like, oh my goodness, you can apply these in so many different ways. But it takes practice to kind of take a step back and see your skills see them manifest in different environments and in different career paths. Generally speaking, most skills, like I said, are transferable. And more often than not, it's kind of an issue of branding your skills and how you talk about your skills versus the skills being actually not transferable. So understanding what your skills are and being able to articulate how they might be able to show up in different career contexts gives you a sort of toolbox to better move into a new career path and be able to, really discuss with a potential employer what you may offer to their organization, which really at the end of the day is the most important thing when it comes to interviewing, which we'll get to in just a minute. And then finally, the fourth area of reflection is acknowledging your interests. All of us have topics, causes, communities that we care about. If we're doing work that aligns with those interests, we are a lot more engaged, we're a lot more fulfilled. I oftentimes see people making compromises and they assume, well, hey, I probably couldn't get a job that aligns with my love for animal rights because it doesn't pay enough, or they assume it doesn't exist. And that's oftentimes really not true. You can usually find work that is in an area of your interest, or it might be related to an area of interest. So taking inventory of what your deep interests are can give you some material to do some thoughtful research and identify those different organizations or perhaps different environments and industries that can get you adjacent to the things that you deeply care about. And it also gives you a sense for kind of what your options might be out there for you in a broader sense. And so I would love to kind of take this time and go to our thought question number 2. And what in that question is, which one do you need the most right now? Where do you think you are, and how might you connect that back with your fear or your obstacle that you wrote down in that first question? Which one do you need to connect the most with? I'm going to give you 30 seconds here, roughly speaking, to kind of answer this question. And this is going to give you a place to start when it comes to kicking things off in the reflection phase. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds here and let you think about this. Okay. Again, if you feel compelled, I would love for you to share your reactions in the chat, but also feel free to keep those private, keep those to you. This is really about you and your journey. Hopefully you're starting to able to make some connections, thinking through what your fear is, kind of what's blocking you right now. Maybe it's not a fear, but maybe it's just an obstacle. You have something in your way right now that is preventing you from really being able to kind of think through what comes next for me. And you're able to kind of identify some of the patterns that you may need to work on and kind of unblock in order to make that next career move. But I would love to move on to the second step here in our career design process, which is the definition phase. Once we've gone through and reflected on who we are, what we care about, we're then ready to move into this second phase. And definition is all about figuring out what criteria I want this next chapter of my career to satisfy and what the different paths are that could actually bring me there. And it's important to recognize that when we're talking about careers, that everyone's definition of quote unquote success is different. And just by recognizing that can be hugely liberating. And what I often see when working with career designers is that a lot of us, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, are striving for somebody else's definition of success. Instead, we need to be thinking about what does success look like for me as an individual, and not thinking about it in our kind of broader lives, but thinking about it in the next 3 to 5 years. Because oftentimes our lives, we kind of go through these different changes and different steps. It's oftentimes really hard to kind of think through the next 20 to 30 years of what success looks like. Instead, we kind of just need to box it in and think about the next 3 to 5 years. The other thing that we like to talk about in the definition phase is that there might be, again, many different career paths that lead to fulfillment for you. And so that's, again, why it's so important to understand that your own definition of success and that others' definitions of success may not actually be a good fit for you. And you need to start to release those from some of the narratives that you have in your head when you think about your career. There's oftentimes this idea that a lot of career changers kind of enter our programs thinking about, and that's this idea that there's this singular career path that's out there that's just waiting for them to discover. And oftentimes I see a lot of disappointment come from that belief, because it's just generally not true. There are so many different paths that are out there that could meet those criteria that you're looking for, that's going to bring you success. It's sort of like when you kind of hear someone say, you know, just find your passion and the career will present itself. That's generally speaking not good advice, because our passions change over time. Things change over time. Our lives change over time. We may have families that depend on us. And so there are so many different ways that we can find fulfillment. This idea that there's just this one path out there that's going to lead us to this amazing success is just not a great way to look at things, and it's very limiting. And so broadly speaking, there are different trade-offs that you'll need to make as you define those different paths that you can take. And so what this definition phase is all about is recognizing the criteria that I want this next chapter to satisfy. Again, perhaps you may have family obligations that have come up that may not have been there in the past couple of years. So starting to identify those different paths that would actually align with those criteria, that would leverage your strengths, your interests and values that you identified in the reflection phase, are really what the definition phase is really all about. And so within the definition phase, there are kind of two main components. The first is what we call defining your career criteria. And that's kind of what I was just talking about just a minute ago. So roughly speaking, there are 8 most important factors that you need to understand about yourself in order to get clarity on the options that you might be able to pursue. Looking at this list here, you can see these 8 different criteria. There's nothing really groundbreaking about this list, but I'm always amazed at how few people actually sit down and think through the answers to what their preferences are for these 8 questions. I won't go through them line by line just for the sake of time, but you can go ahead and read them here on the screen. And once you have thought through some of your kind of gut responses for what each of these might be, the hard part is then actually having to rank these criteria from 1 to 8, 1 being the most important thing that you need to prioritize for your next career move, and 8 being the least important thing that you need to prioritize. Again, going back to the idea that there will be trade-offs that you need to make, but having this information in front of you is going to alleviate so much stress that you need to satisfy all 8 of these different criteria at a given career. It's sort of just unrealistic. And so allowing you to kind of prioritize and figure out what actually matters most to me and getting very clear on that, it will give you a tremendous amount of clarity. And we do this exercise in a lot more detail in the career design program. Again, I'll mention a little bit more at the end. But that's really kind of what the definition phase is all about in that kind of first step. And then the second step is about collecting different career path ideas. So you've laid out the criteria for what you're looking for. You now have kind of these factors of the things that you really need to consider and prioritize. The next step is to actually go out and look for opportunities that are interesting to you and that align with the criteria that you just defined. There are a few ways to do this. The first thing that you can do, which almost might sound too simple, is to get a group of friends and family together and have a brainstorming session of different career path ideas. This doesn't have to be, you're calling a meeting of all your friends and family, but you can be, out at dinner with your friends, and you can just kind of casually ask the question of, hey, like, I might be thinking about a different career path for me. What have you thought that I might be able to do in my career? What have you been able to see me doing as a potential career of mine? Just asking these types of questions will be very helpful because you can get their feedback on the possibilities that you can look into. And I also would encourage you to share your career criteria with them so you can get very specific feedback, and it helps kind of get you out of your own head, and it helps you rely on those who know you really well to help generate some ideas for you that you may not have thought about otherwise. Another thing that you can do is use some career assessments and tools that can help you think through some new possibilities. These may not be the career assessments that you might have taken in high school, which usually come out pretty inaccurately. There are some new and improved tools that you can get started on. The one I recommend using is careerexplorer.com. I'm happy to share that link and kind of the follow-up with this webinar. It's a very comprehensive assessment that looks at your strengths, your personality, and it gives you a pretty good list of career paths and even goes into depth explaining kind of why those might be a good fit for you. All of these things are a good starting point, and using your friend Google is awesome tool as well. Again, these are a great starting point. Really what you want to kind of do is try to just get as many different career path ideas as possible, and also try to identify ones that you may never thought of before. So you can start to, again, kind of open up that criteria and kind of see, what's actually out there for me? What are my options? And then start to look at them using those 8 different career criteria that you identified. Again, there's a lot out there on the internet. By knowing just how to look for it, there are a tremendous number of resources out there. And like I mentioned, Google is a really, really great option. I think a really easy search term that you can use is alternative careers for, and then you fill in the blank for the title that you have. You'll be surprised at how many folks have written about career changes, probably doing something very similar to what you're doing, into a new career path. And there's just a whole plethora of resources and experiences that people document out there on the internet. Again, kind of the trick is figuring out how to find them. And we definitely teach you how to do that in the program. But again, using the internet and kind of just going and typing a few different search phrases is a really great way to kind of get started. And so that leads us to thought question number 3. This question is all about identifying one person in your life, friend, coworker, family, etc., who you could brainstorm with. So one of the key things that we always talk about in Mission Collaborative is not just thinking about our careers, but actually taking action and having small little steps to make forward progress on our career journeys. So I'm going to give you a shorter amount of time on this one. I'm going to give you about 15 seconds because you probably have a gut reaction of who that person might be. Jot down their name of somebody that you could brainstorm career possibilities with. And I'll give you 10 seconds starting now. Okay. So hopefully you have thought of that person, and hopefully my challenge to you is at the end of this webinar, send them a text, send them an email, whatever it might be, however you typically get in contact with them, and just ask them if they have 20 to 30 minutes to chat and catch up in the next week or so, and start to move to taking action on your career path right away. Start talking about it with people. The best thing that you can do is get out of your own head and start to collect some data points with the people that know you the most and who love you and want to support you in your next career phase. And so moving to the next step of the career design process is the testing phase. The testing phase is all about evaluating your options. This is the step that's most commonly skipped, but it is very, very important. The entire philosophy of the testing phase can be kind of summed up with the phrase, quote unquote, try it before you buy it, if you've ever heard that. One of the things that I love to just say is that, hey, you wouldn't buy a car without first taking it for a test drive. So why would we ever do that with our careers? And so the testing phase is really all about figuring out how you might be able to get some data points, collect some information about what it's actually like to work in potential career paths that you're really interested in, so you can actually confidently say, hey, that this is something that I want to do. So again, you've gone through this experience and this process of identifying those paths. You've done the reflection. You're figuring out kind of what could be a good fit for you. And in the testing phase, the next task is then to start narrowing down those options and choosing the right one that is going to be a good fit for you, and making sure that, again, it's not something that's going to be worse than the one that you just left. This is all about exploring ideas before committing to them. It's about reducing the risk of taking the wrong step, and it's all about giving confidence. Beyond making sure that this is the next good move, it can also really ignite this enthusiasm for the path that you end up deciding to take. I am very guilty of this, and I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, may have done this at some point in time. In an interview process where you go into an interview and you kind of have to fake it a little bit because you don't actually want the job you're interviewing for, or you weren't super excited or really sure about the company. It doesn't feel good. And generally speaking, employers can kind of see through that, and it doesn't, again, make you feel good to kind of fake that enthusiasm. And so the testing phase can really help you avoid this by bringing you tremendous clarity and confidence, because you're actually going out and, again, collecting those data points. You're successfully trying out that future career path, and it can make you this, compelling candidate when you go out and start interviewing, because you actually believe it's what you want and you're very confident it's the next, best move for you. So how do you do this testing component? I've talked about it in practice, or talked about it in terms of kind of the philosophy and the theory behind it, but how do you actually do this in practice? So there are kind of 4 distinct strategies for testing a career path that work really, really well. They range from being simple, but not always super effective, to a lot more intensive, but very enlightening and insightful. So I think the key thing with career design is that you really get out what you put into it. And so the more you're willing to sit down and try these things out and really collect the data points, the more clarity that you're going to get. And so looking at each of these strategies here, let's kind of go through these. The first one that you can do is relatively easy, is to talk to somebody who already works in that role or that industry. Call up somebody, you may already know them, or is in your network. You may have not spoken to them in a while, and get a sense for what they like about it, what they don't like about that career. Ask about some of the broader challenges within the industry. What is it like to wake up and do this job on a day-to-day basis? What does it look like? What makes you super excited? The more that you can connect with people who actually work in the industry and live in it in a day-to-day capacity, the easier it will be for you to actually comprehend what it might be like if you were in their shoes. So you're not living in this sort of what if I'm in this career, what might it be like if I'm in this career? You get to actually get some firsthand experience, or I guess secondhand experience of somebody working in it, but then you can also help kind of inform what it might be like for you kind of in that situation if you were working in that career. And I know what you might be feeling. A lot of people tend to get uneasy about kind of the idea of networking and all the nerves associated with it. A lot of folks believe that, networking is transactional and it's disingenuous. And I want to be really clear that this is different from that. You're not, asking for a handout. You're not really just trying to make connections with somebody. You're actually approaching them with a question, and you're seeking information. You're approaching it with humility, and I would encourage you to also offer something in return. Whether that's, saying, hey, if you ever need anything, it's, at some point in time, I'm happy to tap my network for you. Happy to support you in any way in your career path. And in the program, we teach people to really show up with a curious attitude and show up with sort of this goal of gathering information versus trying to get somebody to like you. If you go into this with this mindset of really wanting to know more about somebody's work and their experience with it, the more likely the connection is going to just happen naturally, because I think it's one of the things that we tend to not talk about, but know that people really like to talk about themselves. And so if you get somebody to talk about their career path, they're more inclined to want to help you and be really interested in kind of supporting in your career journey. And so, you might approach them and say, hey, I'm really interested in your work. I'm interested in how you got there. I really want to learn more about kind of what it might be like to break into this kind of similar path that you're in. I'd be so grateful if you could connect with me for a few minutes, or even just share a few thoughts here asynchronously if you're sending an email or if you're sending a LinkedIn direct message. And also just acknowledging that their time is valuable, and again, kind of offering a little bit of kind of value in return, and also just being grateful. I think that's some way, another way that you can add value in return is just being very grateful and being very humble when you approach and kind of ask these questions. And this approach might make you feel a lot better about reaching out, because you're being really transparent about what you want. It's not this kind of like hidden thing when you're networking. You're like, okay, what does this person really want from me? You're being transparent, you're being straightforward, and you're just kind of saying, hey, you know a little bit more about this than I do, and I would love to learn from you. And so that's kind of the first option here. The second thing that you can do is attend events and conferences. I really, really like this option because you are getting a taste of what this path is like, because you're immersing yourself in some of the topics and the conversations that are taking place. Work isn't just about the day-to-day experience that you have, but what is the broader thing that you're solving here? the work that you're doing is solving some sort of challenge that we have. And so getting comfortable and getting a better understanding of what the challenges are that the industry is solving will give you a really good sense of, hey, am I intellectually stimulated by this? Is this something that I care about? Is this something that aligns with my values? Going to events and conferences are such a great way to do that, because you can really, tap into the practitioners who are at those events and talk to a lot of people, and kind of knock it out in a couple of days, or even in a webinar or something like that, instead of kind of putting in a lot of work and doing that over email or doing it over LinkedIn. So again, the kind of takeaway here is, the more you can immerse yourself in these spaces, being with people who are in that field, are going to give you a lot of really good information. So kind of what you might expect, the challenges that you might face in that role itself. The third testing strategy is the most novel, which is called a test project. I personally love test projects, and it's something that I have done with every single career that I've ever had. And that's really what we focus on a lot in the curriculum. And this is kind of the bread and butter of the try it before you buy it. Most people have never tried this before, but it's actually quite accessible if you're willing to put in the effort. So kind of explaining what a test project is. So imagine if someone handed you the career or role that you're interested in, and you were tasked with completing a project that you'd likely be asked to work on. So let me get really tangible here. So let's say I want to become a graphic designer. My goal would be to identify a project I can do on my own time without anyone's permission that isn't going to take me a lot of time, and perhaps something I can do this weekend. It'll take 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to give myself a prompt to design a better logo for a company that I'm familiar with. There is absolutely nothing stopping me from going ahead and taking what I know about this career path and actually going out and trying a redesign of this logo. And I'm doing the work that I would be doing if I were a graphic designer. This project wouldn't take me a lot of time. At the end of this, I'll have a work product that I can actually share with some of the practitioners that I know. And someone who does this for a living can actually provide some feedback and say, hey, this is really fantastic. Or, hey, you're off to a really good start here. Here are some suggestions for ways to adjust this, make it a little bit more, clearer or a little bit better. Either way, this is a hugely insightful activity, because you have now validated or invalidated that this is something that you would likely enjoy, and whether or not you'd be a compelling candidate. It's going to give you a little bit of that taste of, okay, here's what it's going to be like, not only to do this work on a day-to-day basis, but also how hard or how easy it might be to go out and land a job in that particular path. The kind of the I think best case scenario is you're kind of going into this and you realize maybe this isn't something that you want to do, and you want to keep practicing it on the side and say, hey, this is actually something I just want to do as a hobby, and I don't want to do it as a career path, because that is giving you permission to kind of not ruminate on that as a potential option, and it's giving you permission to move forward and try something new, and kind of unblocking your career. Kind of a cheesy analogy that I always like to say is that, your career is often like dating, where you figure out oftentimes what you don't want before you figure out what you do want. And testing is a great way to figure out what you don't want very quickly. Again, this idea of a test project is something that ideally takes a couple of hours on a weekend. And it's also going to be really insightful, again, about how you feel approaching this project. If you're really dreading this, you set some time on your schedule on Saturday or Sunday this week, and Saturday and Sunday rolls around, and you're like, man, I really just don't want to do this. I think that's pretty impactful, because I don't think this is something that you might want to do as a full-time career if you didn't enjoy this test project. So it's giving you sort of this information, not only about if you're good at it, if the skills that you have align with this, but also how do you actually feel about doing the work itself, which is really, really important. The project should feel energizing. It should feel rewarding. And this whole process is going to bring you a lot of clarity around how you feel about it. You might be thinking, hey, that's cool in concept, and that might work for a graphic designer because that's a very easy example, but it probably doesn't work for the career path that I'm thinking about. I can assure you that you can do a test project for almost any career path that you can fathom. It's going to definitely look different depending on the path that you're interested in. But broadly speaking, the framework itself is very applicable across industries. And it's the sort of thing that we help you with and think through in the career design program. The fourth testing strategy is to arrange a consulting gig, which is more hands-on and it's more involved, like I mentioned earlier. And it's basically doing this career path as a side gig. And so this is where you would actually find a company or even a client who is willing to pay real money to have you complete a project for them. This would be helpful in learning whether or not you would enjoy this, of course, because you're actually doing the work. It would give you a lot of clarity as to how qualified you are because someone is paying you to do this and they're definitely judging the product of your work. And it's higher stakes. But it's more insightful and really trying to identify, how you might feel about this path. And again, it's really putting the try before you buy into action. Okay, so those are the 4 testing strategies that you could implement. The thing I want to really just leave you with here is that it's so critical to go out and run these experiments, to collect data, to get a sense of what is going to be good for you, and collect data in a very unbiased way. You don't want to just go out there and affirm things that you're already thinking about. You want to challenge the preconceived ideas that you have about career paths that you're considering. So you know that before you commit to it, it's something that you really are excited about, and you have done a very thorough job of evaluation in terms of whether or not this will be a good fit. So intentionally, you should go one by one, eliminate those options that aren't a good fit for you. Again, you'll find that you'll probably figure out what you don't want before you figure out what you do want, and this will allow you to move away and eliminate those options and move towards the ones that are actually a good fit for you. And I know this seems like a lot of work, and it is work, but it will ultimately save you many headaches and potentially years of working in a role that's not fulfilling. Just very transparently, one of the hardest things about my job and what I do in being a career coach and working with career designers is, when I hear them say things like, man, I have just wasted decades of my life doing something that I don't really care about. I wished I learned this. I wished I knew this so much earlier, or I wished I at least tried this path out before I really committed so much time, energy, and investment into this path. And so testing is all about saving you that investment of your time, your resources, and your sanity too at the same time. And so testing, again, is something that's going to require effort, but it is very important. And looking at time here, I definitely want to make some time for Q&A. So I'll go through the launch phase here, and then we'll get into some of the questions that you might have. But the launch phase is the 4th and final phase. And this is all about figuring out, once you have figured out what that career you want is, it's actually going out and identifying those companies and starting to apply. So you've done your research, you've tested out those options, you're confident that this is the best fit for you, and you're ready to land that job. The process most of us use for job searching actually fails majority of the time. So for every 10 jobs that we apply to, we may hear back from 1 of them or 2 of them, 3 of them maybe, if you're more qualified or included the right keywords. This is a very ineffective process. To make it even worse, if you're someone who is trying to change industries or make a bigger kind of career shift, you might have a different set of constraints because you're more of a quote unquote non-traditional candidate, and you have to articulate your skills in a different format. And so to overcome those hurdles, it's really about focusing on relationships, and that's what the launch phase really is all about. We go into this in the program, but the main thing that I want to leave you with in terms of the launch phase is that it's kind of a losing game trying to game the ATS systems, the application tracking systems that a lot of organizations use to filter candidates out. So we believe in the power of relationships. We believe in the value of relationships. You would be shocked at what value the folks, even on this webinar, the fellow alumni on this webinar can offer you in terms of advice, in terms of connections, whatever it may be, they are going to be so far more valuable than trying to go out and play the numbers game with these kind of online career applications, or these online job applications. And so once you've invested in those relationships with the employers and the individuals within those organizations, which again is what the launch phase is all about, this process will be a lot smoother and a lot more enjoyable, honestly, because you're also getting to know the people that you'll work with on a day-to-day basis. So the launch phase is really about effective relationship building with organizations and the people within them, who could potentially hire you, even if they don't have a current job opening at the moment. It's really important that you start to establish, yourself, your name at that organization, because when they do, open up a job application, they're going to think of you first. The mantra that we always like to use is relationships over resumes. And that's really, again, what kind of guides the steps of this process. But I'm going to pause there just again for the sake of time. I want to get to some Q&A. But before I do that, I wanted to just mention the Alumni Career Design Fellowship that we have been talking about. It begins on April 6th. Early enrollment closes March 16th. So you have plenty of time from now until early enrollment closes to save $50. This program is something that you'll have access to indefinitely. You'll have access to the content indefinitely. So if you have to change careers again at some point in time in your career, you'll have access to that. It requires about 7 to 9 hours of time per week. And I think I'm biased, obviously, but it's definitely worth considering, especially if you're at a point where you're asking yourself kind of what comes next. I want to stop going through the motions, and I kind of just want to get some clarity. And you'll also meet some amazing fellow UAB alumni. So that is all the content that I have. I will go ahead and pause there, and I would love to get to some of these questions here. And I see Greg just popped back on. So yeah, Greg, I would love to see if you have any questions or if anything came through the chat, and I'll get my camera back on here.
Yeah, you bet. And let's go ahead and keep that slide up, and we'll have a similar slide here coming up in a little bit as well as we close. So when it comes to late and the decline, because a quarter of our audience is in their late career, and I think by definition that's 45 to 55 with the decline coming after that. Is there ever a time that's too late to consider a career change?
I fundamentally believe the answer to that is no, but I think that's also something that only you can decide, because it also depends on how much longer do you want to work, what is work doing for you, or what is it taking away from you. I think work is something that inherently we should think as a means to a broader, more fulfilling life of a holistic life. And so if that means, hey, I want to focus a little bit more time on my grandkids or some of these other things, then I think it's something that, again, you'll have to decide for yourself. But in my opinion, there's no time where it's too late. I think it's really ultimately up to you. And the time that you spend investing in yourself is time that's always worthwhile, because you're also getting to know yourself a little bit more at every stage of kind of your career journey.
And we got a question, and I think you touched on it, but maybe a reminder. This person's at the beginning of their career. They're just feeling that they're not being challenged. They're overwhelmed by the knowledge that there are so many careers out there. What is a good first step to figure that out? Is that conversation, the brainstorming session that you were talking about?
Yeah. So I think what I would say to that person is that talk to people who have careers that you admire. Figure out what are kind of the through lines of the different career paths that have been appealing to you. And the best thing that you can do is just start building relationships, just start talking to people, because you'll never really know what it's like until you bridge that gap. You start to get to know individuals who are working within those organizations that can give you a better sense of what it's like to work in that role, in that industry on a day-to-day basis. And I totally understand the feeling of overwhelm. And I think the one thing that I would remind this person of is that you're early in your career, you have plenty of time. If you decide that this is something that you don't want to do in this next career move, you have plenty of time to change that career. And again, kind of going back to the first question, is that there is no time that's quote unquote too late to change your career. So the best thing that you can do right now is just get a ton of exposure and get a ton of that information, those data points that I was talking about, so you can figure out what you don't want. And that will give you a much clearer path towards what you do want.
And it's interesting, the different phases of the career and what the concerns for the individuals are. Person wrote in, they don't want to lose money or benefits to make the career change. And I know that's huge, but what kind of advice would you have to that person? Because chances are, they could have 3 to 4 weeks of vacation. They're going to be dumped back to 2.
Yeah. So I think, well, my initial reaction is this, and this is how I would also give advice to a friend, is I think you have to think about the opportunity cost. So are those benefits, the salary, whatever kind of thing that you have right now, is that worth the years of life that you're exchanging in order to get those benefits? Because you will never get your time back, but you probably can get money back in some way, shape, or form, whether it means you have to take on a side gig for a little bit, or you might have to work extra hard in some capacity to maybe start from kind of go back a little bit and kind of work your way back up. I think the thing that I would really just make sure that this person understands is that you are doing a trade-off of your time versus your money, and you never want to be caught in kind of these golden handcuffs of hey, I just can't get out of this because I will lose so much. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, again, our time is limited. And so what's most important here is your long-term fulfillment, because that has so many ripple effects on the other aspects of your life.
It was interesting to me when you talked about, brainstorming with somebody. We had a couple of answers that they were open about daughter. And the one that surprised me was former boss. And I'm guessing that this person might have been comfortable enough to have that conversation during their tenure with that boss. How much should you be open to discussions with your current boss? And you know what, I'm not fulfilled, I need a new career challenge, things like that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think my answer is it kind of depends on who your manager and who your boss is. I think, and I also think too, that if you don't have a good boss, I think that's probably an indicator that you might need to either change teams, find a new one, go to a different organization, because your boss has a huge effect on your fulfillment and your growth. So I think if you are in an organization where you can have those types of conversations, absolutely have those conversations, because a good boss is going to want to invest in you. And they also will understand that, hey, you're probably not going to be here forever. And their role as your manager is to help facilitate your growth. So whether or not you stay or you go, really their job is to make sure that growth is happening no matter what. And so I think it's important to be able to say, hey, these types of tasks they're not really playing to my strengths. And then coming to that conversation also with solutions too. So I think it's one of those things where you have to set it up intentionally, where you're not going to them saying like, hey, I'm miserable, what should we do? What I would suggest is say, hey, I'm feeling unfulfilled in these specific kind of areas of my responsibilities. And I'm wondering if we might be able to tweak XYZ thing so that I can tap into this strength of mine more, or I can start to leverage my strengths and my skills doing this task more effectively. I think anytime you can come to your boss, your manager, your organization and say, hey, here's a different way that I can probably add way more value than I am right now, they're going to be all ears.
And Ashley, thank you so much for stepping in and pinch hitting.
Absolutely.
For Steph. We were looking forward to this for, I think, upwards of 6 months. And at the last moment, she wasn't able to do it. But we're blessed to have you and thankful that you were able to provide your expertise in this area. So thanks so much for spending your afternoon with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And Steph sends her best. She is very disappointed that she got sick at kind of the last minute. I was on a call with her earlier today and she was trying to talk and I was like, I think your mic isn't working. She was like, no, my voice just isn't working. So she definitely needed to sit this one out, but it was an absolute pleasure being here. It was great to see you. And like I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach me via email. I'm more than happy to help. And hopefully also see you at the fellowship starting in April as well.
Thank you so much. And as a reminder, a replay of today's webinar will be uploaded on our website. Live attendees will get an email once that link is ready. And just a quick note highlighting that UAB Alumni Career Design Fellowship. We already have registrants who have signed up. It is open. Take advantage of our early enrollment through March 16th. Save $50. This fellowship is for you if you're wanting more balance, growth, impact from your career, or if you're just trying to figure out how your skills and experience translate to other career paths. You can find out more at alumni.uab.edu/career fellowship. Meanwhile, we invite you to come back for these upcoming webinars on Tuesday, March 26th. Come back for the science of graying. Is it possible to turn back time? As Dr. Melissa Harris explores the hair-raising answers on what's behind hair growing gray. Then on Thursday, April 11th, it's the science of caffeine, chemistry, consumption, and controversies, where Dr. Daniel Smith will delve into all things caffeinated. The Science of series for this year concludes Tuesday, April 23rd with the science of sleep from A to Z. Join us as Dr. Justin Thomas takes a look at the physiology behind sleep, how much is needed, and health consequences of not getting enough. And on Wednesday, May 8th, we'll welcome certified financial planner Mary Meadows Livingston for Between a Breadwinner and a Caregiver, the sandwich generation unwrapped, as we take a look at how to handle the needs for aging parents. Registers for these and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. And finally, let us know how we're doing. The QR code on your screen will take you to a very brief survey where you can share your thoughts of today's webinar and let us know what you would like to see in the future. And scroll through the chat. Click on our new LinkedIn page. Follow us there. It's open. You don't have to request to join that, but you do, as an alumni, have to request to join the group, which will have different content, which we hope you guys own for that. Again, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. And as always, go Blazers.